A female police officer gunned down doing the job she loved.
First thing I saw was the policewoman collapsing.
She was hit. She fell down. The colleagues rushed to her.
Named 2 men suspected of conspiracy to murder.
Baghdadi and Matuk were seen on the first floor where the shooting took place. That placed them at the very heart of what's happened over the next few minutes.
But will they ever face trial?
They have been handpicked by Gaddafi. They have been indoctrinated by him. It is inconceivable for Gaddafi to give up 2 leaders like Matuk and Baghdadi.
"26 years ago, this picturesque central London square was the scene of a shocking act of terrorism. Yvonne Fletcher, a young female constable, was policing a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy here when a gunman opened fire from the building. PC Fletcher was shot in the back and fatally wounded. Her murder triggered a political and diplomatic storm which even today has her friends and family asking, who killed her and why can't he be brought to justice? Tonight, for the first time, we can piece together the crucial events leading up to and following the murder of Yvonne Fletcher. We have acquired a confidential legal report sent to the Crown Prosecution Service that summarises the key evidence, including pictures and biographies of key figures, diagrams and photographs, forensic evidence, but which, most critically, suggests who might be prosecuted for conspiring in this brutal murder. Yvonne Fletcher was described by her colleagues as a diamond of a girl. She joined the Metropolitan Police force aged just 19. She was the shortest police officer in Britain and had been turned down by 2 other forces because of her lack of height.
She was my best friend. Very bubbly, very sweet, very gentle, very small. Everybody used to know her. She used to enjoy her work. People would come to the police station, believe it or not, and ask for her to do various jobs for them. So she was very, very popular.
This was one of the happiest times of her life. She was engaged to be married and had recently taken on extra responsibility at work by training new recruits.
She had everything to look forward to. She was happy at work. She had just got engaged and she had such a bright future.
On April the 17th, 1984, she was due to police a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy in St James's Square. In theory, it was a routine assignment. But unknown to her, 2 warring factions within Libyan politics were about to come face to face. A group of exiles were planning to protest outside the embassy about the regime of the Libyan leader, Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. According to some experts on the country, he had developed a ruthless method of dealing with his opponents.
He was furious at the prospect that Libyans could be demonstrating against the regime abroad, could be trying to destabilize the regime, and would be using safe havens in countries like the United Kingdom to try to demonstrate against some of the things that were happening in Libya. And he had a policy of trying to have these people eliminated.
Alarmed by the prospect of such a high-profile show of dissent, Gaddafi's supporters in the embassy organised a counter-demonstration. This was the murky and sinister background as the protesters arrived in St James's Square.
It wasn't a very big demonstration, but some of these anti-Gaddafi students had come from as far as Manchester, their faces hidden to avoid identification by observers inside the bureau.
On the coach that day was Juma El Gamati, Back then, he was one of the organisers, but today he's a businessman and writer on Libya. And this is Mohammed Makhlouf, another organiser, but today he's a filmmaker.
We booked out of the bus. It was a beautiful day, April. And the first thing was this beautiful smile from the policewoman Yvonne Fletcher. She was greeting us, saying good morning, what a beautiful day. I'll never forget her face. She was smiling.
We stood in the place assigned to us behind the barriers. We got our placards out, and then we start chanting things like no to dictatorship in Libya, yes to freedom, down with Gaddafi, down with the dictatorship, things like that.
And then the pro-Gaddafi demonstrators as well start gathering on the other side.
The two groups lined up opposite each other in the corner of St James's Square, outside the Libyan embassy. Yvonne Fletcher was stationed just in front of the anti-Gaddafi protesters.
I saw somebody opening a window on the first floor of the Libyan embassy, which was unusual because they didn't usually open the windows.
There were two windows, lifted up by about this much. I would say maybe about 20 inch, 15, 20 inch.
And the shots rang out. First thing I saw was the policewoman collapsing.
She was hit, she fell down, she rolled on the ground. Her colleagues rushed to her. It was awful.
11 shots were fired from the embassy. Yvonne Fletcher was hit in the back.
Yvonne was writhing around on the floor in pain. Myself and other officers crowded around her, and everybody else scattered. What seemed like a few minutes, we were left in St James's Square on our own outside the embassy with no one else there at all. It was quite frightening. Looking back on it, it was very frightening. I went down to her as she's on the ground here. I put my hands under her head and sort of cradled her and trying to help her. And the complete silence, the silence afterwards, there was no noise whatsoever.
As he tended to his friend, it dawned on John Murray that they were still in the firing line.
Once I'd realised that shots being fired, I thought if they open up again, that's it. There'll be none of us left. We had to get her out of St James's Square. You know, we couldn't do anything else, so we had to take her into Charles II Street.
The injured took cover out of the line of fire. Bodies were now strewn across the street. 11 Libyans had also been injured in the shooting. Yvonne Fletcher was bundled into an ambulance by her colleagues.
We made our way to Westminster Hospital, and on the way to the hospital, Yvonne said to me, she said, "John," she said, my stomach hurts. So I thought, well, I've got to do something. So I spoke to the ambulance man, and I got a pair of scissors, and the only thing I could think of doing was just cut her skirt. It seemed strange, but it seemed to relieve the sort of pressure that she had. So I cut her skirt, and I said to Yvonne in that ambulance, I said, "Yvonne," he said, "don't worry. You'll be okay, and we'll get whoever did this, don't worry, we'll get them."
Around an hour and a half after being shot in the back, 25-year-old Yvonne Fletcher died.
One of the first things that I said to myself was, why her and not me? Why? Why Yvonne and not me? When she had everything to live for. But I just could not believe it. It didn't happen in London. It didn't happen at demonstrations. It never happened before.
Police had decided to evacuate the whole area and to get the thousands of office workers near the bureau out as quickly as possible.
Back in St James's Square, armed police surrounded the embassy. In theory, the murderer was cornered. Police were ready to storm the building. What was stopping them?
These people inside the building, as far as the police were concerned, had opened fire on one of their colleagues. The temptation to charge in there, all guns blazing, must have been huge, and somehow they held back, knowing that there were other wheels turning.
Yvonne Fletcher was murdered as she supervised a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy. She was shot by a gunman firing from the first floor of the building behind me here. A tense standoff began between the police and the Libyans, and many police officers wanted to storm the building, believing the killer was still inside.
No doubt about it, her killer was in that building. So why not storm the building and arrest those people? They were responsible for her murder. I mean, it stands to reason.
But this was no ordinary building. It was an embassy. Any action against it would have to be sanctioned from the very top. With the Prime Minister abroad, the Home Secretary, Leon Britton, took command.
I was conscious all the time of a tremendous responsibility, of course, yes. It was probably the greatest single crisis-type responsibility that I had in my career as Home Secretary.
One of his first calls was to send in the SAS. Expectations rose that the Libyan embassy would be attacked. 4 years earlier, the SAS had successfully stormed the Iranian embassy, where 26 hostages were held by terrorists.
Well, back in 1984, I was a member of the SAS. I was in one of the squadrons there that was on standby with the counter-terrorist teams. We knew that Yvonne Fletcher had been shot, and we knew that we were going to be called in. So basically, we were given the gypsies to say that, get prepared to move.
But any room for manoeuvre was fast running out. 1,500 miles away in the Libyan capital, Tripoli, the British embassy was also put under siege.
The first thing that actually happened in Libya that was sort of affected us and which we had to report to London was that sometime around 2 or 3 o'clock, when we normally would have left the embassy and the staff would have gone home, we found we couldn't. We were prevented from leaving the embassy. And then we knew that, you know, there was a crisis in Tripoli as well as a crisis in London, if you like.
Foremost in the British government's mind were not only the diplomats and staff in the embassy, but also the thousands of Britons who worked in Libya.
They were potential hostages. At that time, Colonel Gaddafi was a completely unpredictable wild card, and you just didn't know what he was going to do.
With weapons drawn on 2 continents, who would blink first? The SAS were now assessing how they might attack the embassy.
We obviously had to disguise ourselves as coppers, basically, and that's what we did. We had to visually look at the front of the building. We had to see it, see what it was like. What was it made of? Were the windows reinforced with bars? Did they have security glass in? You know, stuff like that.
But there was a further complication. Under international law, the police couldn't enter the embassy without the permission of the Libyans. It now became clear the siege was not going to be resolved quickly. A game of diplomatic cat and mouse was going to be played out over a number of days.
With the siege now in its second day, the police are continuing their tactics of patiently waiting and talking to the Libyans inside the building.
Just over 24 hours after the shooting of Yvonne Fletcher, and the Libyans weren't only in touch with the police, they were also looking to win the propaganda war.
Do you have any message at all for the British people?
Well, what I could say was nothing to do with us, and we're innocent, that's all.
This stance was reinforced by Colonel Gaddafi himself when he appeared on television the next day to goad Britain.
Suddenly, on this people's bureau, it is very, very serious, and we are surprised how a responsible state like England carry on committed this crime.
Gaddafi's grandstanding was typical of his leadership. Since taking power in Libya in 1969, he'd developed a brutal style of dictatorship.
Gaddafi had only one way of dealing with opposition. There will be random imprisonment, there will be torture, there will be summary trials, there will be imprisonments for a long, long time.